that we spend on competitiveness, output growth that supports the country and supports also our traders so that they can export. NASA will give us a detailed presentation, but the ethos of this program is that our Ghanaians, we must be tired of being poor and being described as poor when we have such vast resources and also the potential for an extraordinarily improved human capital that will drive this program. The program is principally a private sector program, and we believe that a private policy. Because one thing that is always important to remember is that no matter, particularly in our circumstances, at the enterprise level, and that is what this program is designed to achieve. We believe that this is a program of President Mahama's, which is determined to build our private sector as a domestic provider of produce and as a powerful exporter to the 425 million people in ECOWAS and the 1.4 billion under the AFTA region. And it's important for us to know that the journey is going to be a difficult one that have led to the levels of crisis in our country. So without saying too much, I will let Master speak to us in giving you the components and the answers of the export so that we can have a better understanding of how we will reach the point where our economy is so productive. Our workforce is one of the best in the world and digitally fluent. And our supply chain systems are working to make us competitive so that we can then achieve the objectives that all of us wish for ourselves, our children, our families, and also will make Ghana, hopefully, a powerhouse in West African trade and the global trade. Thank you very much. So, Master, please.
Thank you very much.
Can everybody see the screen?
Sorry.
All right.
So, the objective of this interaction really is to provide you a preview of what the Twin Power Economy Program is before the launch on Wednesday. So I hope all of you are going to be at the launch. This gives you basically an opportunity to get to see everything that you'll be hearing on that day, and then to be able to ask all the questions that you need to ask, so that in your reportage you'll be reporting from a place of deeper understanding than what a lot of people have. So what we'll do is we'll talk about what the Twin Power Economy is, and that's important to understand because I'm sure if you speak to 10 people on the street, what is Twin Power Economy, you get 10 different responses. So let's get to understand what we mean when we say the Twin Power Economy Program. Then it's important to also understand why we need the Twin Power Economy Program. And then I'll discuss some strategic priority projects that we are looking at under the Twin Power Economy Program. And then the value chain financing strategy, that's our strategy for financing the Twin Power Economy Program and the businesses that would be operating within the strategic value chain. And finally, I'll just mention a few featured opportunities. And this we put there because oftentimes people ask me, so how can I take part? And so giving you a sense of what are some of the ways that people can take part and enjoy the benefits of the Twin Power Economy Program. Okay, so to start off with, what is the Twin Power Economy Program? And we start off from what the president himself said, because the president is the vision bearer. It is his vision, it is his program, and we all take guidance from where he wants to go with it. And what he says is that the 24-hour economy is more than just a policy. It's a catalyst, and that's the part it's a catalyst of industrialization, export promotion, and job creation. So export promotion, industrialization, and job creation. And that's why, for instance, when he was appointed the presidential advisor, he appointed the presidential advisor for 24-hour economy and accelerated export development. So you realize export promotion is very important there. Industrialization, it's important for us to build a modern economy, an economy that has gone through the process of not only developing agri to feed the people, but also industrializing to produce the finished goods that we need to power our economy. And also job creation. Job creation, and we get to understand it, even further when I talk about why the 24-hour economy. We need an economy that actually works and delivers the jobs and prosperity for our people. Not just an economy that grows for a few and does not necessarily create a job for the Ghanaians. And that's why he also talks about the fact that it's about building an economy that works for everyone, every hour of the day. So social justice is important over here. We're building an economy not just in Accra, but an economy across the country. So we're looking at building something that works for everybody, everywhere in Ghana, and not just a few elites, but every single person can benefit from it. So that's the direction that the president gives us. And then on May 28th, when he met the private sector folks, he also talked about, he gave a distinction of what the 24-hour economy is as a destination and what it is as a program. So as a destination, and this is what a lot of us actually talk about when we talk about 24-hour economy. As a destination, you're looking at getting to a stage where you have an economy that is so productive that you are utilizing every single resource that's available to you. And where you've optimized the utilization of your resources such that just a one shift economy, and we are so efficient that we are active, and we are so efficient that we are optimizing the utilization of all resources. But to get there, you need a program. And the program is what the 24-hour economy program is all about. Because see it as a journey. It's a journey to get to that destination where you have that optimal utilization of all your resources. And that journey requires us to be able to identify all the constraints that prevent us from building that economy and being able to take out those constraints so that we eventually get to that destination. And within the program, we've set for ourselves 6 key objectives. So the first one is that we want to significantly increase input self-reliance and reduce Ghana's vulnerability to external shocks. The second one is to facilitate, and let me talk a bit about the input self-reliance and the vulnerability to external shocks. When you look at our industry today, we are told that we import more than 50% of inputs for manufacturing in Ghana. And yet, we consume more than 90% of everything that we actually manufacture in Ghana. So when you have a situation where, even in terms of the things we manufacture, we need to go outside, get inputs before we are able to manufacture. When it comes to agriculture, almost all the inputs that we use for agriculture, we are importing. Poultry, we import day-old chicks. We don't produce any day-old chicks. We import the seeds that we use for agriculture. So every single thing, we need to go out there and import. And COVID taught us one thing, that global supply chains can be disrupted. And if you don't build that resilience and that self-reliance, you're going to get to a stage where if anything happens on the global stage, Trump bombs Iran, then you start wondering, is this going to become a big news in Ghana? You don't want to get to that stage. You want to get to a stage where you are self-reliant. So one of our objectives here is to be able to build that input self-reliance and then in doing that, also reduce our vulnerability. So build a certain level of resilience to external shocks. That's number one. Number two is facilitate the comprehensive integration of value chains to produce more of our goods. And this is also a very important objective for us, the integrated value chains. Because one of the things we realized while we were doing our analysis leading up to the development of this program was the realization that there are a lot of really good programs and projects scattered around the ministries, departments, the NGOs, private sector, and all of that. The problem we have, though, is one, you don't have a coordination across all. So Ministry of Agri, in doing this, imported 2 million. So Ministry of Agri, in doing this, imported 2 million birds, 2 million day-old chicks for the agri sector, the poultry sector. Poultry farmers came to get it. This process was good, right? They're going to produce poultry. 6 weeks later, the poultry was ready, but this was the problem. At that time, the only processor that we had in this country was Dako Farms. And Dako Farms also, when the government announced this push for poultry, they also imported their own day-old chicks. And their day-old chicks were also ready for the market. So they couldn't process other people's day-old chicks. They had to process theirs. So people had their day-old chicks. Well, people had their matured poultry stay on additional 2-3 weeks before they could get processed, because Dako Farms had to finish theirs before they start working, processing anybody's. Then there was another problem. We haven't talked about storage. At that time, there was no storage facility in Ghana. So when they started processing, they couldn't find any place to store it. So now you have farmers who had invested in poultry farms, who had, taking care of the poultry. They were ready. First, the poultry got ready later than it had to be, and now they have to sell it cheap, because if they don't sell it, there's nowhere to store it. That is because we didn't think of an integrated value chain approach. When we're bringing in the day-old chicks, we didn't think about, once you bring the day-old chicks, where would they be processed? What would be the offtake? All of that we didn't think about. Right? Now, our program is looking at ensuring that today, all through the value chain. But also important, also integrate different value chains. Because when you talk about poultry needs feed, right? The feed will come from maize, will come from soybean, will come from fish meal. Those are other value chains that integrate with this poultry value chain to ensure that you are producing the poultry at the cost that is affordable. Because today, when you talk to our poultry farmers, they tell you feed is about 70% of the cost of producing the poultry. So if you bring all the poultry and you haven't thought about how do you produce the feed, essentially you're not going to be able to get poultry at a price that's competitive. So that's why we talk about facilitating the comprehensive integration of value chains to produce more of our needs. Number 3, I don't think that requires too much explanation. Optimize the utilization of production resources, including human labor, power, natural resources, and capital to achieve high productivity, shared prosperity, and more balanced life. Essentially, we want to make sure that we are optimizing the utilization of every single resource available to us. And to this, right, there's something that someone actually said, which continues to gnaw at me all the time. He said, one of the things we realize in Ghana is that you cannot move 10 meters without seeing something that is not excellent. And because we are surrounded by so many things that's not excellent, we take not being excellent for granted. And so we actually think being excellent is not the norm. The norm is not to be excellent. So we don't do everything to the best of its ability. So if we say we'll start at 11, no, it actually means we'll start at 11:30, 12, maybe 12:30, right? We don't optimize the utilization of everything that we have. Being excellent, part of being excellent is making sure that you are optimizing the resources that are available to you and getting the best out of it. And that's one of the things that we want to be able to get Ghana into. Where we have the ability to optimize the resources, but also we have the mindset to optimize the resources. Then 4 is increase the volume and types of production, and that's increase meaningful employment. So sometimes when you talk about production, increasing production, we are thinking about it not only in terms of output. So we need to increase the volume, but we also need to increase the quality of output so that our products are competitive globally. So increase the volume, increase the quality, increase the variety of outputs. Complete local, regional, and international markets. So here we're looking at developing, so producing enough for ourselves and producing enough so that we can also export. Today, for a lot of areas, when you actually see what we do is, when you talk to a lot of big agri people, their first focus is they are producing to export, not even producing to feed ourselves. So you have a situation where even when we don't have enough to eat, we are looking at export. So we are not actually exporting our surpluses, we are exporting what we could be using. We want to change that and get to the situation where we are exporting as much as possible our surpluses. There might be other places and other situations where we are just producing to export. But ultimately, we should be exporting sustainably, we should be exporting, the things that we've been able to produce enough of for ourselves. And not exporting the situation where you have today, where you have rubber manufacturing companies don't have enough rubber to feed their factories. And yes, we are exporting all the raw. And then finally, we want to equip the Ghanaian productive sector, better attitude to production and production relations and socio-cultural values of them. This is really about ensuring that we are building the right society. We are building the people with the right mindset. We are building the people with the right skills. And we are ensuring that the relationship between producers, the relationship between producers and labor and all of that is one that is born out of respect and where you have equity in all of those relationships. You don't have a situation where an employer employs people and then, give them 1-2% of the value that they generate, who are underemployed or who are in vulnerable employment, and 1 or 2 big business people who are enjoying all of it. We don't want that. We want more fairer relationships, more equity, and then also the right mindset, the right skill sets, and all of that. So that's our objective. You realize that if you take a look at the theory of change, and we develop a theory of change that you can take a look at to understand basically what is the long-term objective of all of these things. So what's the long-term objective? What is the short-term objective? How are we then looking to be able to get there? If you read the program document, you get to see the theory of change in a bit more detail. But what our focus here is just the 3 transformation pillars that we are looking to use for this research that we want to do. And the transformation pillars, the first one is production transformation. And I've spoken a bit about production. So here it's about increasing the volume, the variety, and the quality of outputs. The key sectors that we are looking at here is agriculture. We're looking at manufacturing, and I'll talk about the specific value chain in manufacturing. So agriculture, manufacturing, construction, culture. So actually viewing culture not just in terms of identity, but also in terms of its commercial and economic value. Then we have the supply chain and market system efficiency as the transformation pillar number 2. And supply chains and market efficiency is important because what we realize when you do the analysis is that most of the price build-up in Ghana comes from our logistics systems. So we're actually reading one report that talked about the fact that if you pick a commodity on the markets of Ghana, up to 50 to 60% of the cost of that commodity can be attributed to the logistics, to the supply chain. The global average is about 15%. So it tells you how inefficient our supply chain systems are. We have terrible road systems, You know, if you're moving yams from Tamale to Accra, by the time you get to Accra, more than half of the yams are gone. We actually realized post-harvest losses for yam is about 70% in this country. That is too much. So part of what we are trying to do in supply chain and market systems efficiency is to ensure that we are building efficient supply chains that ensure that things move from farm gate to market, factory gate to market, in a timely manner, in a way that also does not cause price buildup. And finally, we have the human capital deployment, which is really, because it's humans that power all of this. And in building this economy, we want to have people with the right skills and also the right mindset to be able, so the skills for today's economy, the skills for the economy of tomorrow, and the mindset of excellence, of patriotism. So when you talk about mindset, it's not just an excellence, of excellence, but also of patriotism. Because today, if you talk to a lot of young Ghanaians, their objective is to get a good job somewhere and run out of this country. You hardly find a young person whose objective is to find something in Ghana and make sure that we are advancing a Ghana agenda. And there's also a phenomenon that I find very interesting, and this is among politicians. Often you have people ask you, or do you have political ambition? Do you have presidential ambition? Do you have ambition to become MP? And my response often is, have a national ambition. You know, we haven't built a national ambition. So that if you ask what the ambition is, it's not about me becoming an MP, or it's not about me becoming a president, but it's about where do we get our country to so that we create better lives for our people. And that's the kind of mindset we want to build. A mindset where people are actually, you know, looking at where we get our country to, and not just what do I get for myself. Where we are looking at ensuring that we are building a country that can compete anywhere in the world, and where our people have the best of lives. So those are the three transformation pillars. There are 8 programs that we've built around these transformation pillars. The first one is the Agri-Transformation program. There's the manufacturing program, construction. Show 24 is culture, arts, and tourism. Connect 24 is supply chain and market efficiency. Fund 24 is about how we finance all of this. Aspire 24 is the mindset and skill sets program. And Go 24 is the mobilization program to ensure that everybody, we're able to bring everybody along. Go to the next one. Part of the way we build this program is, number one, adopt an integrated value chain approach. I explained to you why this integrated value chain approach is at the beginning. And then we are also building it as a private sector focused program. So the government is doing a lot in terms of the macroeconomy. The Bank of Ghana is looking at monetary policy, finance ministry, looking at the fiscal policy. There's so much that's happening there. But the macro also needs the micro. So if you build a strong macroeconomy, what you also need is you need the private sector to be able to come in a way that they take advantage of it. So a big part of what we are doing with the 24-hour economy program is to create the environment and create the mechanism by which the private sector can take advantage of the macroeconomy that we are building. And that's why we are private sector focused. And you will get to see, when we talk about finance, some of the ways we are looking at to bring in financing to support the private sector to be able to drive this agenda. And so as much as possible also, you realize that the way we build the program is to build it off the government balance sheet. So financing for this program is not going to be the kind of financing that you put on the government balance sheet. And this is important because today we are in an IMF program. And even after we go up, there will be obligations that we need to do. Those obligations constrain the ability of government to be able to mobilize all the finances that we need to drive the agenda. And so we need to find ways of bringing in additional money that powers this decision forward. If you're going to just rely on government to do it, it's not possible. Today, the IMF program says we can borrow more than 250 million. I think if you consider all the money we can get, it's about $450 million a year. We can't develop with that. So what we are looking at is how do you get the private sector to bring in the funding to be able to also help us drive this forward. And just to give you a sense of the value chain you're looking at. So you realize that you can't do everything at the same time. So what we are looking at is we are focusing on very specific value chains for now, and we'll be developing the value chains, different value chains as we go. So for now, in terms of agri, we are looking at the cereals. So in the cereals, we are looking at maize, rice, and millets. Vegetables, we are looking at tomatoes, onions, pepper, and okra. Then roots and cereals, we are looking at cassava, sweet potato, and yam. Then with oil seeds is soybean, groundnuts, and oil palm. And then we have, actually, yeah, here, why don't you just tell us? We have sugar, we have poultry, and then we have fish. Those are the ones. We decided on this based on 4 criteria. One was the import bill, what do we import a lot of? 2 was impact on inflation, food inflation. So we're looking at the food inflation basket, which commodities had the highest weight. 3 was the general demand in Ghana, and the 4th one was No. Actually, it was impact on other value chains. Yes, impact on other value chains. So the 4th one was its impact on other value chains. So for instance, if you take maize, it impacts so many other value chains. Right? So stuff like that. So those are the 4 criteria we use. In the manufacturing space, we are focusing on pharmaceuticals. We are focusing on machinery and fabrication. Now, machinery and fabrication is important because if you look at our agriculture and even some of the manufacturing we do, almost every equipment there we import. But there's very simple tools that we should be able to manufacture in this country. So the idea of the machinery and fabrication bit is to ensure that we are building the capacity to manufacture the very simple tools that we require in our farms, the very simple tools that we require in some of our factories to be able to produce. And then we have textiles, garments and textiles, and then of course agro-processing. Those are the value chains that we are looking at. So now let's talk about why the 24-hour, why do we even need this 24-hour economy? The simple answer is that because today's economy that we have is structured in a way that does not generate the jobs and prosperity for Ghanaians. That's the simple thing. We have an economy that is structured for extraction and not for transformation. It's structured in a way that it does not necessarily benefit the Ghanaian. So this basically is a nostalgic slide. It shows you what we've done before, what we're capable of doing before. We produced the Akasanoma radio. We produce corn beef. And people get shocked that Ghana used to produce corn beef, but corn beef is so simple to produce, right? But we don't have it today. Today, all we know is corn beef from Brazil and other places. So you have an economy today which is structured in a way that we are largely dependent on the export of a few, raw materials, actually 3 raw materials: gold, cocoa, and oil. And almost everything else we import. It is no different from the economy of the 1920s. Only difference is we replace timber with oil. So we are essentially just an economy for extraction. And then we import everything else. So if you take a look at this graph, for instance, so this graph we're trying to look at contribution to growth, right? Right? So what's the contribution to GDP growth in Ghana? And if you actually look at composition of GDP, it's not very different from this contribution here. But what you see is trade and repairs today completely dominates our economy. Okay. We've moved to a situation where agriculture's contribution has come down, manufacturing contribution has also come down, but mostly it's trade and repairs. That's driving growth in this economy. And most people tell you that, well, agriculture's contribution coming down is not necessarily bad. But if you look at most industrialized economy, as the economies grow, agri's contribution will come down. But then what then you have is that you have industrialization going up before you get to the stage where services come down. So some people say, oh, but if services is going up in Ghana, then we are industrialized. No, it is what economists call premature deindustrialization. So we move from an agrarian economy to a service-driven economy without industrializing. So basically what we can have is everything else that we use, we don't have the technology. We're importing all the technology. And if you look into this trade and repairs, almost all the components are actually imported commodities. So our economy is driven by, trade in imported commodities, imported technology, everything else. And, we export raw materials that people then use to produce the things that they bring to us. And sometimes once they do that, they also give us a bit of aid from all the value that they've extracted from us, and we are happy. We need to change that. Now, in looking at the things that we actually import, we wanted to take a look at what the composition of export, what are the things that we export, because mind you, we're looking at a self-reliant economy. So you need to know what is it that your people rely on so that you can figure out how you produce it. And number 2 and 3 were the interesting ones here, which for me was a bit shocking when I didn't know this until I started looking at it. Well, number 2 largest food imports is guts, bladders, and stomachs of animals. And number 3 is frozen cuts and offal of fowl. This number 2, the one here, I was shocked when I saw it. Because this is, you go to a chop bar, you get your TZs and your towel and all of that. And you expect that this towel is from, some sheep that was slaughtered in, say, Ashama or somewhere. Not knowing it's coming from Europe, right? The yamade we are eating, the gizzard and all of this, is coming from somewhere in Europe. Luckily, we didn't have any gizzards today, but we had, chicken cuts over here. We can't have an economy where even the simple things that we can produce here, we refuse to and import. Okay. What you have is a number of things. First of all, if you have an economy that is structured that way, even when you are trying to solve problems in one sector, you end up causing problems in other sectors. And I'll give you an example. You give $100 million to somebody to start a tomato manufacturing plant. But what the person will most likely do is, they'll use some of the money to buy the land. That's almost all the money that will remain in this country. The rest of the money, they'll buy machinery, they'll go and import it from somewhere. They will buy the raw material, the tomato, we don't produce the tomatoes, they will import the tomatoes. They will import the human resource that you need, because they'll tell you need a certain kind of engineer that you can't find in Ghana. So you might end up having about 90 million out of that, your 100 million, then you give to somebody to start a factory being used to buy things from outside. Not only that, every year they would also need to then demand, more things from outside in order to keep the business running. So by giving 100 million to someone to set up a factory, what you might have then done is impose a $90 million charge on your balance of payments account, which then goes to impact your currency, it impacts your inflation, and then the important inflation and all of those things that we have. But there's also something critical that we are not even seeing. Here we are looking at, this graph looks at GDP growth over time. from 1992 to 2023. And it's looking at GDP in current US dollar terms. So this is not growth rate, this is actual GDP. And you realize it's grown over the years, right? Our GDP has grown over the years. Now this looks at our employment rates over the years. And what you see is while GDP is growing, our employment rate is falling down. So the economy is not creating enough jobs with growth. We have, because of the way we structured our economy, we've hampered the ability of the economy to create jobs with the growth that it experiences. We did an analysis in 2023 looking at what we call employment elasticity of output. In the 90s, this was around 0.7. By 2023, when you look at 2023 data, it was about 0.2. What does that mean? That means in the 90s, a 10% GDP growth was improving employment rates by about 7%. Today, it's improving by just about 2%. You can't build an economy where all your growth translates into job creation for people somewhere else and not for your own people. So this is why we need a 24-hour economy. We need to change this structure of the economy so that you now have an economy that is, industrialized, is self-reliant, resilient to economic shocks, and whose benefits are actually experienced by its people. Where if the economy is growing, you see Ghanaians actually prospering. Not an economy where it's growing, but Ghanaians are like, we can see it in our pockets. That is why we need a 24-hour economy, and that's why we put in place a 24-hour economy. Now, if you take the 8 sub-programs, the way the 8 sub-programs have been structured is to identify the specific constraints within those sectors and figure out ways to overcome those constraints. So one of the things that we are doing, even to start off all of this, is we're proposing certain incentives that ensure that we are directing investments into the value chain that we want to focus on, and also ensuring that it's easier for people to succeed over there. Part of what we are doing with those proposals, incentives proposal, is to remove discretion. Because if you take a look at the exemptions law in Ghana today, there's so much discretion, which means you apply and somebody has to decide if you get it or not. One of the things we want to do is to ensure that if there's clarity on what you need to do to enjoy these exemptions. You don't need to go and apply to anybody. You just need to know if I do A, B, C, D, it applies to me. Remove that discretion and make it very clear for people to know what to do. But in order to also execute the sub-programs, we need to then develop specific projects that tackle the constraints and ensure that we overcome those constraints. And some of the projects that we've talked about, that we've developed, what I'm going to talk about. First one is the Volta Economic Corridor. And perhaps some of you have heard about it because the president spoke about it at length. Because as you look at Ghana's development, the distribution of development in Ghana and all that, one of the things that strikes you is that when it comes to infrastructure, the roads, the railways, and all of that, a lot of it, you find a lot more of it, it's not a lot though, right? So the little that we have, you find a lot more of it scattered in the western side, and not much on the eastern side. Now there's a reason for that, because people don't have their minds to that. The reason for that is that the colonial masters who built a lot of this infrastructure, when they came, they were interested in extraction. So they built the railways to the mines where they could extract the things. They built the railways and the roads to the place where they could get the cocoa and move the cocoa to the ports and get out. The unfortunate thing for us is, after independence, we haven't sat back to rethink our development paradigm and shift the way we look at development. So you have a situation where you have this lake, the Volta Lake, the biggest man-made lake by surface area in the world. So much land around it, but so the black dots are actually population density. You see how all of this place is almost empty, right? You don't have people around the lake. In other places, when you go to other places, the water bodies are actually the places where you have more people living. In Ghana, it's the opposite, right? Because of where it is. And there is very little irrigated land across it here. When you look at the total irrigated land under cultivation in Ghana, it's about only 5% of the total land under cultivation. The public sector projects that we actually looked at was only about 33,000, Charles. The data, 33,000 hectares, right? Only about 33,000 hectares. You have more than 4 million hectares of land under cultivation. Only about, 33,000 of them is under irrigation by public projects. And if you consider all the private, there's less than 5% of them under irrigation. And yet we have all of this water. We spoke to an engineer from the Volta DRA about the effects of irrigation on the water levels in the lake. And what we're told is the amount of water that the lake, the power generation, they use for power generation is so much that even if we irrigated every part of the Volta lake, it's not going to affect power generation. Because the irrigation won't reduce the quantum of water. Then let's use the water itself as the transportation. Because water for transportation. And water transportation, we learned, is actually 1/8 the cost of road transport. So it's cheaper, it can be greener, and it is less expensive for us to develop. So if we use the water for transportation, then we open the place up, and then we can create, irrigated agriculture all around there, and ensure that we are significantly increasing agri output. And then you can then co-locate with industry, agro-processing, and all of that. And then you have an economic corridor that can feed all of us here and even our neighbors. And closely linked to that, so basically what this project will do is, one, connect the Akosombo, the Pakatan Railway to the lake, so then you are connected to Tema. So you have a way from Tema all the way to the lake, and then to be able to transport things along the lake. When you're able to do that, what that means is that the people from Mali and Burkina Faso and that are coming down, they don't need to come all the way to Accra. You can stop up here and pick up their stuff and go. You reduce accidents and all the congestion that you have on the roads on this part of Ghana. Then we are also looking at converting the airport in Tamale into an air cargo hub. So it's the closest airport to Europe and North Africa and north of us. It's an international airport, we are not necessarily using it for much. But when you build so much agriculture over here, what we also need is we need a place where you can transport things very quickly. And we want to then, as part of this corridor, create the air cargo hub at the Tamale airport to transport things. So that's the Volta Economic Corridor concept. That in itself is massively transformational if we can get it done. And we've had some interesting expression of interest. I'm sure within this week, there will be some of it that would be eventually announced. It's not in my place to announce it, but it will be announced and you will start to see some of the work that's going on over there. So there's the logistics thing. There's this project to mainstream digital skills within the TVET system. Why are we thinking about it? Number one, digital skills are vocational skills today, right? And you want to get to a stage where everybody has access to the digital skills. And you have TVET colleges spread all over the country, who, if you take a look at their curriculum, they are not necessarily producing the right kind of people, the right kind of skills for the market. So what we are doing is we work with them on a project where we would develop a curriculum for digital excellence, and then they will start rolling this out within the TVET system. What it will then do is that it means if it's available in the TVET system, then it's available to almost all Ghanaians, because you find the TVET schools all over Ghana. And then you build, together with that, you build the digital centers of excellence that provide the tools for both the students and also for the communities. So you end up solving the problem of the training people with digital skills, but also providing digital tools for the communities to be able to access. So that's also one of the projects that we are looking at. Let's see, are there any more things that actually, so the first thing that we are looking at are these 60 beds to pilot it, and then we'll move it forward right after that. There are several other projects. So you see, I'm sure this has been sent to you. You see several other projects that we are looking at. The thing is, we are not going to be able to execute all of this at once. We need to phase this. But one of the things that we also realize in developing this project is, when you talk to our development partners, the development finance institutions and all of that, what they tell you is that Ghana often doesn't have projects that are viable. So in the year, when the year begins, it's not that we are thinking about projects to fund. And then we spend the rest of the year doing project preparation, and by the end of the year, we've forgotten about it and we jump onto new projects. We want to change that and build a long-term pipeline of projects which are all focused on the objective that we want to achieve, so that we can build towards it. That's what we're looking at, and that's why we develop all of these projects. Now let me talk about the value chain financing. To start off with, this is very music to our ears. The Bank of Ghana wants to work to lower rates to 10% in this country. And we think that's important. Because when you look at financing, right, there were three issues that we identified as big constraints to financing. One was the interest rate. The kind of interest rates we have in this country doesn't allow you to build a business. It can allow you to trade, but it doesn't allow you to build a long-term business. That's number one. Then you have a situation where the tenor of facilities hardly go beyond 24 months. You might get 36 in a few instances. But most credits in Ghana and most financing in Ghana is short-term. You don't have a lot of money coming through the venture capital system. The banks will give you 12 months, 24 months at the most. What's also interesting is that even to get access to this high interest short-term lending, you need to put up huge collaterals. Right. Part of the problem with the collateral and is also regulatory, because the regulator requires them to do that. But then you have a situation where financing is highly collateralized, short-term, and very expensive. It makes it almost impossible for the Ghanaians to be able to compete. Because sometimes you are competing with industrialists who are bringing money from their countries at significantly lower interest rates, sometimes even subsidized. And then you are competing with them over here. You have a situation today when you go to BA and others to buy cashew. You have, I think it's the Indians and the Chinese, who are able to buy the cashew and the cassava and co, because the Ghanaians can't raise the kind of funding to buy it. Why? Because if you are going to get a loan in Ghana, by the time you finish your business, you will be able to pay. So our whole structure, financing structure here, is meant to address these problems. And so we thought of financing in two ways. First is financing the infrastructure, the bulk infrastructure. And second is financing the enterprise. Financing the bulk infrastructure is important because we want a situation where when businesses come in, it is just plug and play. And that's why we are looking at building agroecological parks. And in the agroecological park, essentially what you need is, you need to get the land, prepare the land, put in place the irrigation facilities, put in place the storage facilities and all of that, so that farmers can easily get on there and start farming. You want industrial parks where the land is prepared, you have the energy, you have the water, and all the things that an industrialist needs, so that when the industrialist comes in, it is easy for them to just plug in and play, right? So, but somebody needs to finance this bulk infrastructure so that it doesn't become a headache of the industrialist or the farmer and all of that. And over there, we are working with the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. They are the infrastructure partner for the 24-hour economy program. What they will do is, they are looking to set up 3 SPVs. One focus on industrial parks, one focus on agroecological parks, and one focus on lake transport. And these SPVs will then help in private investments